Now, for more on that, we have with us today Dr. Jung-yeop from the Sejong Institute. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, it does seem like a significant step has been taken to lower military tensions between the two Koreas. As we just heard in that report, military drills have been ceased, and so have weapons, and they've been put away for now. What does this change about the relationship between the two Koreas along this border?
Of course, the foremost concerns on the border issues have been the nuclear weapons of North Korea, but at the same time, that the military clash with the conventional weapons also has been the bigger concern for South Korean militaries, because all those military clashes can be escalated into a bigger warfare between two Koreas. It is very important for two Koreas that have agreed that they are going to halt all the military acts along the borderline, which has been the hotspots for the military clashes. So it is very unlikely in the future that nuclear weapons can be used in the first place. But the thing is that if there's a military crash, even though it's a minor one, it can be escalated to bigger warfare, which can be led to the ultimate use of the nuclear weapons. So I think that the military agreement this time, which can be effective as of today, is very important to reduce the military tensions along the borderline.
This is perhaps the biggest change to the military situation between the two Koreas since the peninsula was divided some 65 years ago. I mean, would you agree to that?
Yes, there has been many efforts to reduce the tensions, but at the same time, that there has been a lot of small and mid-sized provocations, mostly from the North Korean side. And the thing is that there is no mechanism to verify that whether North Korea is sealing their artilleries or whether they are really halting their military exercises. But this time, they are trying to make joint military committee which can do the oversight on those activities, and I think that is why this time the agreement has more weight than the previous ones in the past.
So you've said there's more weight than in the past, but then critics would argue that actually this is not that big a significant step, that all the steps they've taken so far can be reversed very quickly, and actually North Korea hasn't given much in concessions. For example, closing gun ports, I mean, the guns are still there, but the holes are just covered up. They can remove them anytime if necessary. Do they have a point, these critics?
So the biggest criticism came from the side that there's an asymmetric military structure between North and South Korea. The biggest concern for South Korean military is those artilleries along the borderline, and there is no concessions made by North Korea with regard to those artilleries along the borderline. So if North Korea agreed to reposition those artilleries up north, then it would be great for South Korean government. But maybe this time we agreed a little less than we hoped for, but maybe in the future we can lead to the better agreement, and that will reduce more tensions in the future.
Yes, a significant first step which could lead to more in the future, as you said. However, while South Korea has been demilitarizing the border area, at the same time, South Korea has been signed a new agreement with the US, which guarantees pretty much that US forces will remain in South Korea. So the defense chiefs of South Korea and the US met in Washington on Wednesday to sign this agreement. And as we said, the continued presence of US troops stationed there perhaps caught the eye the most. And as well as retaining the Combined Forces Command and the UN Command, which is led by the US as well. How significant is the fact that these US forces have now signed this agreement to remain?
So we have to see that the OPCON transfer or wartime OPCON transfer is not directly related to the presence of USFK on the Korean peninsula. So the concern has been raised because once the wartime OPCON has transferred to South Korea, that means there might be some change on the combined forces command structure, which might be that U.S. general is not leading the CFC. Then if U.S. general is not leading the CFC, then U.S. government might consider that why do we have to put our military forces on the Korean peninsula? So that's why there was a concerns that USFK might be withdrawn if wartime OPCON has transferred to South Korean government. So this time at the SCM special consultative meetings, that two ministers and the secretaries agreed that the presence of USFK is not related to the OPCON transfer. So I think that's a good sign for two alliance management.
I think it is quite interesting, as I said, like between, on one hand, the South Koreans are having a deal with the North Koreans to demilitarize the border, whereas on the other hand, they're having a deal with the US to keep military forces on the peninsula. So doesn't it show the two sides that South Korea has to play in this situation with North Korea and the US, with South Korea in the middle?
So South Korean government and the U.S. government has been doing this SCM for a fairly long time, and the problem for the military agreement with the North Korea is that there has been a lot of efforts to make a new agreement with the North Korea, but it has not been successful because of all those provocations made by North Korea. So I don't think it's a like two-way game for South Korean government, but this year we have made a lot of progress on both sides, and I think the military agreement with North Korea can have some positive effect on SCM meeting with the United States this year.
One of the other agreements that was reached during this SCM meeting as well was the defense ministers confirmed that the Vigilant Ace defense air exercises will not be taking place this December as originally planned and will be postponed to a later date. Now, how important was it to postpone these military exercises in light of the recent situation with North Korea?
So during the Singapore summit on June, that President Trump mentioned that while the dialogue with North Korea is going on, he's going to suspend all the military drills with South Korea. So now, even though there are some fluctuations of the relations between U.S. and North Korea, the dialogue is still going on. Secretary Pompeo actually mentioned that he's going to meet his counterpart next week. So I think it's a natural step for the U.S. government and South Korean government to agree to suspend more mega-size military drills between two governments. So I think that two governments have still agreed that there's just a possibility that we can solve the nuclear issue of North Korea more peacefully than before.
I would like to go on to that point about Pompeo's meeting in just a second. But first, before we move on, I want to talk about as well, there was some reports the US had been unhappy with South Korea over its new military agreement with North Korea to try and demilitarize. But Defense Secretary Jim Mattis tried to dispel some of these reports, giving his support to the military agreement in the SCM joint communique. What do you think? I mean, are the US actually okay with this inter-Korean military agreement, or do they still have reservations, do you think?
So I think that there are two reasons that why some believe that U.S. was not happy about the military agreement. First, that there was a limited consultation between two governments about the military agreement. So the U.S. military was not well informed about this military agreement in advance. And second part is that those no-fly zone and the limited act along the borderline actually limit the CFC. So it's not it should not be unilateral decision by the Korean government, but the United States and the UN Command should be involved in the discussion. But I think that South Korean government and US government discussed enough to understand that this military agreement can lead to the peaceful mood on the borderline. So I think that is why Secretary Mattis said that he gave his support to the military agreement.
Okay, so as you said, Pompeo has confirmed that he will be meeting with his North Korean counterpart next week in the US after the midterm elections. But we've been here before. You know, Pompeo previously said last month that he'd be meeting with North Korean officials very soon, but that didn't happen. And now he's saying it again, but giving no exact date, and we don't even know who he's going to meet. Do you think this meeting with North Korean officials will happen?
So I think this is like second time in last couple days that Secretary Pompeo mentioned that he's going to meet his counterpart. So if it is Kim Young-chul, then probably he would say it's going to be Kim Young-chul. But as he said that he's going to meet his counterpart, somehow I believe that he somehow hope that his counterpart would be changed this time, because United States government has showed their dissatisfaction with the dialogue with Kim Young-chul before. So I think that is why the Secretary Pompeo cannot exactly mention that when and where that meeting is going to be held, and he cannot know who's going to be there as his counterpart for the talk.
The fact that he doesn't know who his counterpart is, it seems that way. Is that what I think that's what you're implying. How frustrating do you think it would be? And how does it show how difficult this is to deal with North Korea, who they won't even tell you who's going to be at the meeting?
So that's the problem between U.S. and North Korea, that even if North Korea agreed to meet Secretary Pompeo or like working level group, like including the Minister Steve Biegun, the problem is that North Korea has not agreed to officially launch the negotiation for removing its nuclear weapons. Even though they agreed to meet this time, it might be about the scheduling the second summit between President Trump and the Chairman Kim. So I think that even though they agreed to meet like next week, it does not necessarily mean that they agree to discuss about the denuclearization process of North Korea.
Well, we'll have to look forward to that and see whether this meeting does happen. But first, of course, we've got the US midterm elections, and we'll have to see how they turn out as well. Anyway, it's great to have you on the show. We're out of time, so we'll hopefully see you next time. And we always look forward to your insights.
Thank you.